You're listening to the Wealth Mindset Show, where Hixon Zuercher Capital Management's team of finance professionals, portfolio managers, and a life coach come together to tackle complex topics in finance and retirement planning so you don't have to. From investment strategies and wealth management to tax planning, retirement income, and aligning your money with your values and purpose, the Wealth Mindset Show offers the tools to thrive.
All right. Hey. Welcome to the Wealth Mindset Show, where our Hixon Zuercher team will have conversations on managing wealth, navigating retirement, and making smart decisions for a secure, meaningful future. I'm Austin Wilson, Director of Investments at Hixon Zuercher Capital Management.
I'm Josh Robb, Director of Wealth Management at Hixon Zuercher Capital Management. And today we are joined by Jordan Shaw, financial advisor here at our firm. And he's going to be helping us with the topic, can you save too much for retirement?
Now, this seems like an interesting topic to discuss because off the top of my head, I'm just saying, I don't know, probably not.
Yeah.
But maybe. So we're going to have to figure that out because it often, we don't think we talk about this aspect too much, but it can have really a lot of implications on your quality of life now and in the future. So let's break down a couple things. First topic, guys, there are some downsides to oversaving. What happens to you when saving becomes too much of a focus, especially in your working career?
Yeah, because most people ask, how much do I need to save, or do I have enough? But really, this conversation doesn't come up as much, but it is important, and we're going to talk about it. But the one is the trade-off, and this is something we talk a lot about, is anytime you're saving, it is a trade-off. You're taking short-term opportunities and trading it for a long-term opportunity or goal. So saving in general, you're always trading off. So at some point, that trade-off is no longer worth it. And that's the dilemma, is the sacrifice between that long-term security of having enough and missed opportunities of right now.
And then I guess one thing to think about is that when you're giving that up now, you're often choosing, like you said, you're delaying that gratification. But that frugality can limit your present-day enjoyment. So maybe you're not going to go on a vacation this year, or as big of one, or drive as fancy of a car, or big of a house, or help your kids with XYZ. There's a lot of different things you can choose not to do today. And that's just something to keep in your head, because maybe you don't have to not do some of those things. Maybe you can do more. Mm-hmm. And that really goes back to knowing your plan, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you need to know what is the goal behind what we're doing. Mm-hmm. The question, am I saving enough? It's so general that, there's retirement.
I get to say maybe. I can say maybe.
Ooh, you can say
every
maybe.
time that question.
I know it's going to come up.
Every time.
It depends.
Of course. But there needs to be something specific.
Oh, yeah, totally. So what are some signs maybe when you're talking to a client that, they may be saving more than they need?
I think some of the signs really come down. You talked about frugal.
Mm-hmm.
And there's frugal, and then there's stingy. And think cheap. Yeah. And I think if you hear or see in conversations, they're kind of borderline or crossing that line, that's maybe some signs you're saving too much. If everything revolves around pinching pennies and getting, the most tucked away, if there's no reason for that, if you're not like, oh man, I'm way behind, I'm playing catch up, I got late start. I mean, there's reasons why you may have to be a little more diligent in savings, but if it's just saving to save, if you don't have the goal, you mentioned it, if you don't have a reason and goal, that's probably a sign maybe you could be doing other things with that money.
Mm-hmm. So, Jordan, how do you go about talking to a client about establishing those goals, getting on the same page of what the plan is for what you're saving for?
Yeah, well, first, it's a conversation at the beginning of a relationship with someone, for sure, but it's actually something that develops over time. Once you see the behaviors of someone with their finances, you can kind of tell, are they someone who's going to be intentional about chasing goals in the first place before even figuring out what those goals are? People sometimes don't even know what their goals are, but it's once you figure out what their behaviors are like, if they're saving or if they're spending too much, then you can say, okay, here's some things that seem to be important to you. Does that line up with what your behaviors are like? And then if that's true, they can work on that and then actually make progress towards that versus just do this step 1, 2, 3 and you'll be fine. If the behavior's not there, it doesn't work out.
Yeah. If one of their goals is spending more time with family and they're saving so that they do that in retirement, having that conversation, if that's your actual top priority,
great.
What about doing some of those things now and adjusting kind of how much is put towards the future enjoyment of family and bringing it into the now enjoyment of family?
I think that a lot of people often say that how you allocate your money today really shows what is important to you. And I think that that's one example of that. So I guess what we're trying to say here is that savings are really just a tool, right? The goal is not to save. but the savings are there to meet the goals that you have in your life, not the other way around here. So that brings us kind of to our next topic is, what is the magic number? And Josh, I know what you're going to say. So what's the magic number? Do you need $1, $2, $3, $5 million for retirement? Or is there just some generic number that people talk about? And how do you guys calculate that?
Yeah, there is no real one number. Just if you take lifestyle or living expenses from one side of the United States to the other, there's different costs of living. So you need different amounts just to have the same lifestyle over in California versus Ohio versus Florida. There's just different costs. So there is no one number for everybody. But the end result is, how much do I need on a, weekly or monthly basis to cover all my costs, food, housing, utilities, all that stuff, and have some left over for the enjoyment of what I want to do. You take that and you take your monthly costs, make it an annual cost, and then you take that and then you can back into how much do I need lump sum to provide that through the rest of my life.
That's the gap.
It's the sustainable withdrawal, right? And so there's rules of thumb. There's kind of a 4% withdrawal rate that we have in our industry. It's, kind of saying if you could take 4% out of your portfolio, it's sustainable for 30 years historically. There's a lot of, we've talked about in other episodes of, maybe it's a different higher, lower than 4%, but the end result is that's an easy way you could divide backwards to get to that lump sum. So if you say I need, $60,000 a year, you could back into how much do I need to accumulate for 30 years of that withdrawal. And you can figure that out. But there's no one number.
I think understanding your spending needs is probably going to be different in retirement too. So maybe you don't have a mortgage, maybe your fixed costs are a little bit lower here and there. Understanding your real needs and backing into that number. So Jordan, how do you sit down with a client and say, I want to build a plan based on your lifestyle, and what is that? What do you want that to look like, or what can that look like? How is that different between like your dream retirement or like what's practical?
Yeah. Well, once we know what kind of the big goals are, we can back into what they want to be spending in retirement. We can add to that, you want a second home, or you want to go on a big vacation every 5 years or something like that. But another key component there is how willing are you to take on enough risk in your portfolio to allow that number and that withdrawal rate to sustain you? Because you might have the same number for two different people, but if person A is more invested in bonds, or heaven forbid, like all cash or something like that, it's not going to work out for 30 plus years as someone who's more invested in the market. So that's another big piece there that you talk through, and you make sure that people understand you need to be willing to allow for some growth in that portfolio when you want to hit all these big goals in retirement.
Yeah. Let's talk about the opportunity cost. An opportunity cost is something that you're giving up, right? It's potential giving up for future gain is what we talked about earlier. So there are things we talked about you missing out on if you oversave today. So let's talk about some of those ideas. What good and what challenges can there be when you delay some spending today for the future?
Yeah, and the biggest one is spending now gives you immediate results, whether it's for me or for someone else, right? If I spend on a vacation for the family, we all get immediate enjoyment out of that. If I donate to a cause, they get immediate enjoyment from that donation. If I postpone that, there's still going to be some enjoyment with somebody down the road, but it's a delay, right? And so that opportunity cost is just, again, weighing the thing of, okay, I have the opportunity to travel with my kids now versus when they're older. Which one will they be more appreciative? Let's take Disney World, for example. Maybe a 5 to 8 year old may enjoy Disney World a little more than a 20-year-old who says, oh, that was fun back when I liked Disney princesses.
Maybe.
And now that I'm all grown up.
There are some Disney freaks out there.
They are. And then you got all the fun stuff like Marvel and Star Wars and stuff. So, you can go anytime and enjoy it. But there's periods of time. So like I look at my daughters, there were times where they were more into Disney princesses than other, right? And so there's trade-offs. If I say all my savings is going to future enjoyment, you can miss out on an opportunity of making memories and doing those things today.
And there's always, you may not be, if you're concerned about spending too much and you're trying to save, you're always spending something. You might not be spending money, but you're spending time. And if you're not spending your time in a way that is adding to the enjoyment of your life, and you're hitting other, like maybe not financial, but other goals in your life, relational goals, just time goals that you want to look back and say, okay, that was a year well spent or a decade well spent. You might not be looking at the financial side. You might be looking at what your time, and sometimes you need to spend money to create those experiences, and it's worth it.
Or you're working so hard to save more that your health and your relationships deteriorate because you don't have the time or energy to take care of those, whether it's you personal health or the relationships, family and friends. Is I'm constantly working. All I do is work so that I can save more for the future. I think of the FIRE movement, the financial independent, retire early. They're saving 40-50% of their income. And a lot of times part of their success is driven on working 2, 3, 4 jobs so you get an income to put away so you can be done. Well, I don't know. What's the long-term impact on, in a sense, neglecting your health for 2 decades so that you can retire and be done at 40,
a 50-year retirement,
but yet you're completely worn out at that point. There's always trade-offs again on what you're doing.
So a lot of people that we talk to are focused on leaving a legacy with their finances, thinking ahead for the next generations, leaving some money to family is usually what happens there, or other causes or whatever. So what are some pros and cons of thinking about maybe blessing and helping those people in your family now by giving them, up to your taxable, tax-free gift limits or whatever maybe, or holding on to that, letting that money grow and doing it in the future?
Yeah. And again, it's always a trade-off. There may be opportunities to bless others now, which you don't have. But there's always a trade-off because the unknowns is what if there's a reason I may need that later and I've already given it away. And so that's one of the harder ones is, if you're very passionate about something, then by all means, get involved and start contributing now.
Yeah.
If you are just looking at giving money away because that's what you heard or thought you should do, maybe there's a better approach to it. I don't know. But, when it comes to blessing others and with your kids or whoever, there's estate planning. There's a lot of reasons why you maybe shift money around. But again, you got to do it for a purpose. You got to have a plan and have a reason for that.
I also think that needs are different too. So like a couple $1,000s when someone is a young family just getting started is more valuable to them than $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 is 20, 30 years down the road.
60 or 70 years old themselves.
Right. So I think that's something to think about too, is like, when could a little bit go a long way in terms of helping someone in my family or whatever? Have you ever thought about how your financial choices reflect what truly matters to you? At Hixon Zuercher Capital Management, we believe that integrating your values and dreams with your financial future is key to achieving peace of mind and confidence. When you engage in deep conversations with us, you'll start to see how your money can support the things that matter the most in your life. Our holistic approach means that your financial plan is more than just numbers. It's a personalized blueprint that evolves with you. You'll have a dedicated team of professionals tailored to your unique needs, all focused on crafting an investment portfolio designed to help you achieve your specific goals. Plus, our on-staff retirement life coach offers guidance to empower you toward a fulfilling retirement that goes beyond just financial security. Ready to transform your relationship with money? Join us at hzcapital.com and let's embark on this journey together. Now, back to the show. Let's talk about next a purpose-driven approach to retirement savings. So let's think about, what if we shifted our focus from the accumulation phase and we're trying to accumulate, save, to more of an intentional living, way of doing things here. So talk a little bit about how that impacts your saving for retirement needs, your bucket list goals, and people that you need to keep in the loop as you're making these plans.
I like this question because a lot of times what we see is people who are so intentional about saving. They're worried about not having enough. Like we said at the beginning, it is so difficult to transition once you hit that where you do have enough and now you need to start drawing from your portfolio and spending the money to support your lifestyle. It's so hard to change that mentality in retirement. So if you can work on that earlier, then it makes it so much easier in that transition where you're saying, okay, I am being intentional about what I'm saving, but it has a purpose, like we've talked about. But I'm also being able to let myself loose a little bit here with my finances to do some of those things now and have some of that mentality about it's okay to live a certain way, to have a lifestyle here, to give money away when I see a need, or to do something fun when I have a desire to do that with my family or whatever it is. So I think it is something that's important to start early.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I've been involved with and know of many situations where that long-term plan never paid off or played out the way they wanted because of maybe a change in health or an early death. And that's, to me, is the biggest thing of all this, is saving too much or postponing everything for a future which is unknown, right?
Oh yeah.
We don't know how long we're going to be here on Earth. And so I'm a big proponent now of that moderation between saving and preparing and being a good steward for your family in the future, but also making sure you're enjoying and doing those things now, because there is no future. And I mean, there's just story after story that is just sad, of people who had all these plans and then something changes and they can't. And they, what I hear is, oh, I wish I would have done more while we were younger or while we were working, when we had the ability. And that's, to me, one of the saddest things, is just that they didn't take those opportunities. They didn't take that trade-off of time versus the savings. And there's more to life than just saving for a future retirement that you don't even know what it will be like. So I definitely think there's a balance.
I think that that's something that you don't often think about until it's too late, right? You just think, oh, I've got 60 years ahead of me, or 50 years ahead of me, or 40 years ahead of me, and things change on a dime.
Yep.
So I think that's something to always keep in mind. Yeah, we don't know the time. Josh, talk a little bit about how working with some expert in determining the non-financial side of things and that impact may help you with your goals.
Yeah, it's twofold, right? Jordan has mentioned it. Like, you need a financial advisor, someone to help you build a plan on how much you need to save. And you could save above that, which just enhances your retirement or speeds up the process. But you also need to be talking with someone from the non-financial side. And we talked about the life coach. We've had Scott Miller here on our podcast with us. Someone who can help you balance and judge kind of those values and purpose side, to say, what could you be doing today versus postponing till later? And some of it costs money. And so trade-off of savings versus utilizing some of that for the today that gives you more purpose in life.
So here's a question, putting you both on the spot. You're my financial advisor, experts in my life, guys. So when do you adjust the plan, right? How do you know it is time to say, okay, I did a good job. I was really aggressive with my saving. Now I can kind of pull back and just live life a little bit.
Yeah. When you have a plan, you don't have to wait to the end to see if you got there. You can know if you're on track.
Yeah.
And if I'm on track, I can make that kind of let off the gas a little bit, make sure I'm still doing what I need to do, but I don't have to go beyond if I caught back up to where I need to be. But again, there's always the unknown. So it's kind of this back and forth of, how am I doing now? What do I see coming? How consistent is my job? Am I worried about cash flow changes? All those things. But in general, if you're hitting your goals, that's a good indicator. You can probably make those adjustments.
What do you think?
Yeah, the tools are there for a reason, right? Like, to tell you if you're on track. With working with an advisor can help you see, okay, am I doing everything that I need to? Like, there is value there, and we're not saying here to, spend. You don't need to save for retirement. Obviously, you 100% do, and most people would fall on the side of, you need to spend or save a little bit more, right? But the tools are there, and once you realize, okay, I am constantly thinking to myself, I just feel like sacrifice. Maybe you don't have to sacrifice all the time. If you're constantly feeling like you're not doing enough in your life to add value, all you're doing is saving money, and it really looks like you're on track, or maybe even better than on track, then that's definitely a conversation to have and start making some adjustments here. And it also matters, how far out from retirement are you, right? Because the younger you are, it's more important to establish those behaviors of saving. Right. But if you've been doing that for a long time and retirement's not too far away, or it's maybe a decade or so away, like, you might have more freedom than you realize.
Right.
Yeah. And when you find that you're not as excited about that future, but you're looking for those things now, like, you're saying, oh man, I wish I would have done that. If you're starting to say those things like, man, my kids are growing fast, I wish we would have, that's the time to start reevaluating and say, okay, am I really focused on the right priorities? Because if you're you don't want regrets. You don't want to look back and say, oh man, I was so focused on saving. Now it's just me sitting here with more money than I need, and I wish I would have used some of it, right? So that's when you can start thinking about adjusting. If you're starting to have those regrets, or kind of like, oh man, I'm missing those opportunities.
And I think that that's something that, especially if you're in a career and in a world where you don't hate going to work every day, you maybe can be okay working a little longer and not being as aggressive with your saving, and enjoy more of what you want to do earlier. It's just there are pros and cons to both, as we've laid out for the last 20 minutes. But I think that's something to keep in mind, is it's okay to enjoy it, because we're just going to reiterate. You don't know how long you got, so spend the time with your loved ones and do things that you enjoy, as much as you can. Realistically, while still saving. Got to be saving too. But that is kind of what we are talking about today. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Jordan, for joining.
I will say, as we're wrapping up today, one of the advisors had a conversation, and the client said, tomorrow isn't promised. That was their words, because they had a health issue in the family, and it was eye-opening, where they are now considering adjusting their plans to experience more in the now, and it took, unfortunately, a pretty serious event to recalibrate that thought. But I'm excited to see where they go from here, because now they have a different perspective. And so, but hopefully for people, it won't take something like that to say, am I just focused on one goal when there's other ones I may be even more satisfied if I include those in my plan?
So this is a great reminder to talk to your financial advisor to see where you are on your plan, because maybe you've been oversaving, which would be a great, like we said, most people aren't in this situation. But that would be a great position to be in, and maybe you can start enjoying what you work for with your family and loved ones. But if you found value in our conversation, don't forget to subscribe to this show, The Wealth Mindset Show, on your favorite podcast player. We're everywhere. And then you can visit us at thewealthmindsetshow.com for more resources. If you're ready to invest with us, or you think that we might be a good fit as your financial advisor, go ahead and check us out at hzcapital.com. We'd love for you to take a look there. And then don't forget, follow us on all social media platforms. We're pretty active there, and a good way to keep in touch as well. So again, thanks, Jordan, for being here, and we'll catch up here real soon. Thanks.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us at the Wealth Mindset Show, where we tackle the complexities of finance and life planning to help you align your wealth with your values. We hope today's conversation provided value and clarity as you navigate your financial journey. Your hosts work for Hixon Zuercher Capital Management, and all opinions expressed by them or any podcast guest are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Hixon Zuercher Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Hixon Zuercher Capital Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. There is no guarantee that statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance may not be indicative of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment, and any investor attempting to mimic index performance would incur fees and expenses that could reduce returns. Securities investing involves risks, including the potential loss of principal, and there is no assurance that any investment plan or strategy will be successful.